In a recent video, I built this high-tech masterpiece inside of an Exoterra 45 by 45 by 90 cm paludarium and introduced you to a very unique species of vampire crab. And in this video, I'm going to be doing something similar, but also quite a bit different. I'm going to be building a low-tech vertical style vampire crab ecosystem inside of this 40 by 40 by 60 cm paludarium. Just like the previous build, this is going to be completely spray foam free and utilize some unique methods that make the entire ecosystem way more natural. Kickstart this build, here is the stack of compressed corkboards I'm going to be using to create a very detailed background. It's a mix of cork with a tiny bit of charcoal mixed in. Unlike the previous Exoterra build, this one isn't going to be optimized for viewing from 3 sides, so I'm going to be covering the background and both of the sides with corkboard. First, I planned how much of the paludarium I wanted to be water and soil. With this information, I then cut the cork panels to size using a ruler. In this case, the tank doors is a ruler and a simple box cutter. After I cut all of the pieces to fit, I lay the tank down on its back and silicone the first pieces into place on the back panel. Then I put some heavy stuff on top of it for 12 hours until it dried. I then repeated this process 2 more times for the left and right sides of the tank. Don't worry about the ugly join lines in the middle at the moment, we're going to be dealing with those soon enough. Now using the corkboard offcuts, we're going to make some simple little structures that will help add detail to the background and sides of the tank. Essentially, I'm just going to be using some bison glue, gorilla glue in most other countries, to glue random bits of corkboard together to make little cork stacks or little cork hills. They look pretty stupid at the moment, but that doesn't really matter because what comes next will change that entirely. I made quite a few of these things in all different shapes and sizes, then stuck them to the background and the sides as randomly as possible. Again, I just use a little bit of the bison glue and the trusty skewer method. If you didn't see my previous video, and I think you should, you can use bamboo skewers to pin things into place very securely. This works exceptionally well for objects that have weight hanging on them, though it does kind of look like someone detonated an echidna inside the tank once you're finished. But we'll clean that up pretty quickly. While you can trim off all of the excess using a pair of scissors or some garden shears, I found using the Dremel 10 times easier. After I hacked out all of the skewers, I used a wire brush attachment to wear down the squared edges to make things look a little bit more natural. But that ended up being a stupid decision which I shouldn't have borrowed from another YouTuber, because the wire brush slowly disintegrated and left tons of little sharp strands of wire all through the tank and through the corkboard. So do yourself a favour and use a proper sanding bit instead, and also don't forget to use a dust mask and run a vacuum cleaner at the same time you're using this, because this step ends up being super messy. After a ton of vacuuming and wire extraction, which I used a strong magnet for, the end results look pretty good, and it's now time to start working on the base. As always, I'm putting down some old aquarium matting for the glass protection. While these rocks don't have any pointy edges that might cause pressure points and issues with the glass, I'm just more worried about dropping the rocks, so I always consider this to be a very handy step to add. I originally planned on using lichen stone, but the shop sent me Sirius stone by mistake, and I didn't feel like messing around and trying to get some new stuff, so I just used this instead, and I think it looks pretty good anyway. Behind this rock wall, I'm adding a clay ball substrate layer, which I find to be the best substrate medium to use for building paludariums. It's cheap, easy to find, and doesn't weigh a ton. On top of the substrate layer, I'm adding a layer of weed matting and then some organic potting mix. The main thing to remember here when setting up the base of your tank is that you do not want your water and soil to mix, so make sure you leave a small gap of air between the 2 layers. Now that that's out of the way, the fun can really start, and this is probably the part of any build process that people really look forward to, and that's adding all of the structure. Just like the previous build I finished, I'm going to be using cork bark pieces for this, all of which will be pinned in place using the bamboo skewer method. I'm also going to be making lots of little pockets which I can fill with plants and soil. Unlike the corkboards though, you need to pre-drill the holes for the skewers to pass through, as the bark is surprisingly tough. When you do drill them though, make sure you do it properly and do it a little bit safer than I'm doing here. And just like before, after skewering everything in place, we do need to trim off all the excess skewer endings again. So far I'm pretty happy with how the hardscape is coming along at this point, so it's time to finish off adding the rest of the soil to the tank. And to make sure this works properly, I'm going to be adding some moss to the bottom of the cork bark sections. This will prevent the soil falling through the bottom of some of these sections, and in time the moss will slowly decay, but the plant roots will hold all of the soil together. While everything does look pretty natural at this point in time, I'm going to make it look even better by covering the entire corkboard surface with clay. Now I'm not entirely sure what type of clay this is that I'm using, but I got it from a local terrarium store here, so it's definitely 100% animal safe. It comes in 1 kilo bags that all you need to do is add water to. Just make sure when you do add the water, you do it very slowly, because if you add too much water, you're going to make a huge mess and you're not going to be able to mold the clay. It'll just be a huge pile of mud. And now for the next hour or so, I'm just going to cover just about every surface I can with clay, leaving all of the interesting textured sections fully exposed. A lot of people will say that clay will crack over time, which is definitely true, but this only happens if you let it dry out, just like this example here. But realistically, in a well set up paludarium, the humidity level should be high enough, and you should be spraying your tank often enough for this never to be an issue. Now that the entire clay base has been added, I'm going to be adding a little bit more hardscape that I found in the forest, as well as an absolute ton of moss. This is all hypnum moss, which I've found to be probably the best stuff to use for an indoor ecosystem like this. I've tried a lot of the other stuff over the years and it's a lot less forgiving, whereas hypnum moss just seems to go and go without any real issues. After adding the moss comes a nice layer of leaf litter from the forest floor, which is again the usual, mostly elm, beech and oak, as well as some acacia leaves, and an awesome little piece of bark here that I found that looks quite like a tunnel. The other really good thing about using clay is that you can actually stick climbing plants like magravia and other things to it without any effort. It also provides a good nutrient source to keep these plants growing. The last core component to add to this tank is the sand layer, which is just going to be fine quartz sand. I don't generally go too thick with this stuff as I don't usually add many plants to the water section, especially in this tank because the water section is going to be quite shallow, so my plant options are going to be quite limited. My plant choices for this are going to be the usual Salvinia, frogbit, some crypts, and I might even add some Anubias at some stage as well, one of the mini versions. So far that's the bulk of the tank done, and now that we have a lot of organics in there, the first animals that need to go into this tank are springtails. And rather than sticking with just the traditional standard white ones, I'm also going to be trying this giant type of orange springtails. On average they are about 3 to 5 times the size of standard white springtails. They reproduce very slowly and seem to prefer a much more protein-rich diet. Which is great because the crabs should get a lot more nourishment out of these guys than the standard white ones. Under this light though, they do appear to be a lot more red than orange at times, so it can be a little bit deceptive what color they are. Interestingly enough as well, they aren't as springy as the white springtails and do seem quite sluggish in comparison. All in all, these guys deserve all the heroic music they can get. They keep the entire ecosystem functioning and healthy. It's quite hard to see in this clip, but this little guy is actually being eaten or attacked by a snail. Since they're quite expensive, I made sure to rescue him pretty quickly and place him back on the land. These little crabs are Geosesarma Penangese, native to the lush forests of Borneo. I was fortunate enough to get some of these from Kay, a fellow crab keeper based in Berlin, who kindly shared me these captive bred babies from her own colony. As captive bred vampire crabs can be incredibly hard to come by, this was a really awesome find. Among the various Geosesarma species, these crabs are some of the most elusive. They spend the majority of their time hidden away, only venturing out under the cover of darkness to forage. From observing them pretty closely, I've noticed that they likely prefer life closer to the ground, favouring deep burrows over elevated terrain, and for the first 5 months so far I haven't actually seen them climb anything, though their parents do climb occasionally, so this makes me think they might not be ideally suited for a vertical style tank like this one. But as they grow, I'll be studying their behaviour and adjusting their habitat to better meet their needs. With so much still unknown about Geosesarma species, there's tons of new and unique habits and preferences to figure out, but the most important thing is to always be willing to adjust as more new information comes to light.